Hey, all you Greta's and Shutez cats out there. Welcome to Unit 5, Section 10, Impacts of Urbanization. So, we'll start in the suburbs. This is an area surrounded by a metropolitan center with a comparatively low population density. So 90%, over 90% of our population growth since 1950 has happened in suburbs. An exurb is similar to a suburb, but unconnected to a central city or densely populated area. Here is some cool pictures. So here we have our large central metro areas, and then our fringe metro, and then medium, small areas, and then nobody lives there. Here we have the number of people in urban versus rural. So more cities, less rural over time. Here is a really cool, the higher the little peak goes, the more people live in that area. So it's a neat little visual of how many people live in the cities. Another thing talking about urban spread. So you start little and then you're going out for shopping and fun, the airport, a little maybe commuter village, got to get your golf in there, and other things. There are more people living inside this circle than there are outside of this circle. It's kind of nifty. Here is all of the states in proportion to how many people they have living in them. So you can almost barely see Alaska. California is definitely really big. Florida, Indiana's almost the right size. There are more people living in these red areas than the rest of the country combined. So just kind of a nifty visual for you. This is the most common country of birth for foreign-born residents, excluding Mexico. So India's got a nice little impact here. Canada's slowly working their way apparently down to Mexico. We've got Philippines over here. It's just kind of interesting to see. I would be interested to see this was as of 2017, if Burma would be taking over in India. There are just as many people in the orange area as there is in the red area. So once again, just a really neat visual of where people are found in this country. Here's areas with population density of over 15 people per square kilometer. So you can see coastal areas are common. India and China haven't really changed, but Australia and Canada have kind of disappeared. So just an interesting visual. Most commonly spoken language other than English or Spanish. Apparently I need to work on my German. Kind of a nifty little thing. Navajo makes sense. Tagalong is spoken in the Philippines, which if you went back a few slides was what was over here. Kind of nifty. Italian is definitely true for Pennsylvania, that's where I'm from. Urban sprawl. So we have urbanized areas that spread out into the rural areas, removing kind of a clear boundary between the two. So where does the city end? Where does the suburbs begin? It's just out. That official noise happens. So causes of urban sprawl. Main thing is we made cars and the interstate highway system, so you could like go places easier. There's that. Living cost, white flight to the suburbs and redlining, which I will talk more about in a little bit, and we're actually going to talk about in class as well. So you can buy more house for less money. If you want to get really depressed, get on one of like the Zillow or one of those home buying websites, but look up houses in like Philadelphia or New York City. Very, very different than you can get here in Indiana. So suburban cities' annual cost per household is almost $3,500 versus urban, what the taxes are paying for. So there we go. So this is why taxes are higher, but you get more stuff. Urban blight, degradation of built and social environments of the city that often accompanies and accelerates migration to the suburbs. So as people are leaving the city and heading out to the suburbs, things are getting ignored, things are falling apart, and then more people are like, oh, I should leave. Gentrification. Now, this is not a good thing. It sounds warm and fuzzy, but it's not. So this is when higher income families and corporations restore an urban area, but they usually do it at the expense of family-owned businesses, low-income housing, and social welfare institutions. So minorities more often than not are the victim of this, and then they can't get the opportunities that they deserve because the rich people came in and took over everything. We have federal and local laws and policies. So in 1956, we had the Highway Trust Fund, federal gasoline tax that paid for construction and maintenance of highways. So we have tax, pays for highways, suburbs expand, more traffic, longer commutes, more gas used, more tax revenues, and positive feedback loop continues. Zoning laws will often separate industry and business. So we had multi-use zoning is more progressive. So, hey, you can use this area for this, and then people can cram more stuff into that same area. So, okay, you can live here and you can have farms here and whatnot. Federally subsidized mortgages through the Federal Housing Administration. These are fairly low interest rates for low-risk areas like the suburb. And there's, once again, I will get more into this later, an openly racist policy known as redlining. We will, I promise, talk about that more in a little bit and in class. Using an FHA loan as you can use that the first time you buy a house and you can get really good deals on your interest rates. Video we will watch in class and talk about consequences of urban sprawl. So increased use of fossil fuels because you have to drive more places. You can't just walk. 2 times more land use per person than in cities. And it replaces farmland and increases the distance to the farm. So now you're paying even more money to get your food because it has to come from further away. How does urbanization affect the water cycle? So more evaporation happens. So here's your natural water cycle. But then in the urban water cycle, you have much less infiltration, more runoff, way more evaporation is happening because there's nothing, the streams have dried up. So more evaporation, more runoff, flooding, or dried up creeks. Less infiltration and groundwater flow because there's a city there. Next one, how does urban sprawl affect the carbon cycle? So way more fossil fuel use, which is much more CO2 production, less plants and less green space, so less photosynthesis. So here's how to do it right. Here is the smart growth, or the 10 principles that the EPA has set out. Excuse me. So if I had my way, I would shut down all the CAFOs, which we learned about in a previous set of notes, and I would replace all of them with these sustainable communities. So, all right, so this is a set of principles for community planning that focuses on strategies to encourage the development of sustainable, healthy communities. Indianapolis is doing this a little bit. We have a plan to implement at least some of these things over the next 5-10 years. So something is better than nothing. But the cities really need to be very proactive in doing these things. It's not like a warm, fuzzy idea. You actually have to do stuff. So number 1, create mixed lane uses. So you can have a whole bunch of different things really close to each other. So you have houses, you have industry, you have shopping, you have schools, you have everything. I grew up in a really small town outside of Philadelphia, and this was a really sustainable place. You could walk everywhere. Everything was a 15-20 minute walk. You could get anything you wanted. Number 2, create a range of housing opportunities and choices. Different people have different incomes, so you need to have housing that fits all incomes, so you can have something for everybody. Excuse me. Create walkable neighborhoods. If you have these walkable neighborhoods, then you don't need to drive everywhere. And some places literally don't even have places for cars to go because you can walk everywhere. We grew up with one. My dad had a car, but we only had one car in our household, so we walked everywhere. We walked to school. If we needed to go somewhere further away, we'd take a bus. But these walkable neighborhoods are really awesome for reducing fossil fuel use. Encourage community and stakeholder collaboration in development decisions. So if the community actually has a say in what's going on, they're going to be much more receptive to any big changes that are happening. So, and I got to participate with this a little bit for what's going on in Indianapolis. So let the people who live there have a say. Number 5, take advantage of compact building designs. And this is really cool. So in this compact development, they have porches in the front of all the houses, so they can have social interaction, and they don't have driveways up front. And that way it's safer for the walkers and for kids playing. And then there's an alley in the back with access to garages. So you can still park your car inside. The houses are going to be longer and thinner, but this way kids can play in the front. Nobody's worrying about cars as much. Pretty cool. The area should have a distinct and meaningful character. So this fosters a sense of place. Does anyone know where this is? If you've not gone, I highly recommend. This is down in New Orleans. The whole city has a lot of character. It's really, really neat to see. So you tend to take more pride in your area if you have this character and sense of place. Preserve open spaces, farmland, natural beauty, and critical environment areas. So don't just put a building everywhere because you can. Have nature and open space. Provide a variety of transportation choices. So transit-oriented development. So have buses, have trains, have subway, whatever works for your city. Philadelphia, just because that's where I'm from, has an awesome train system and an awesome busing system. You can get anywhere. I had a summer job and I took 1 train and 2 buses there, and then 2 buses and 1 train to get back. And it was no big deal. It was super easy to get from where I was in the suburbs downtown to my job and then back. Infill. So if there's an open space, you put something cool there. So we're not tearing this down. We're not gentrifying anything. We're just adding to. So strengthen and direct development towards existing communities. So you got this new, more modern looking place, but you haven't taken anything else away, which is a much more respectful way to do things. And then number 10, make development decisions predictable, fair, and cost effective. Once again, people are going to have a much bigger buy-in if everything works. And then streamline the approval process so you're not doing like 20 years of red tape and paperwork to get anything done. So we have survived notes. Before we go, I want to take this opportunity to let each and every one of you know that you are good enough, you are smart enough, and people do like you. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good God, do your homework.